Hello and welcome to Conversations Beyond the Pulpit. Conversations Beyond the Pulpit is a web series that I created to tackle issues that are controversial, taboo, and often overlooked in the church. The idea behind Conversations Beyond the Pulpit is to bring awareness to these issues that we face and to hopefully help somebody in the midst of it. So today's topic is domestic violence and women's issues, and our guest today is Destiny Mabry. Hi. So Destiny Mabry is a domestic violence survivor. She's an activist, and she's also an educator on teen violence. And above all, she's my friend. Welcome, Destiny. So Destiny, me and you always have like these really crazy, long, deep conversations. We talk about things from sex, celibacy, men, issues, problems, singleness. And I'm always saying to myself, like, man, I wish somebody was recording us because they're so good. And I know we get stuff from it, but I feel like other people could get stuff from our conversations as well, right?
Of course.
Right, you would agree.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really why I brought you here today. So let's jump right in. So in 2014, something occurred in your life that not only changed your life, but I feel like it challenged you. And it, to me, is what sparked your journey. I don't know if I'm right or wrong about that. So do you care to like share?
So in January of 2014, my family received news that my sister and her 2 children were murdered by her husband. Mm-hmm. And of course that broke my heart in many ways. And right before that, I actually left one of my own abusive relationships. So it did serve as a turning point for me. And whenever people ask me how I dealt with it, I saw it as like, I only had 2 ways to go. I could either lose my mind because that was so tragic, or I could take this experience and learn from it and grow from it and teach other people about it and raise awareness so that this doesn't keep happening.
Right.
So when I did lose my sister, I heard numerous stories from other women telling me that they were involved as well. And these were people that I've grown up with for more than 20 years.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, all of these things are happening and absolutely no one is talking about it. And how are we supposed to make any issue go away or lessen the likelihood of it if it's not even being discussed?
Right.
So I decided to start sharing my story as well as my sister's story.
Right. And I like remember that exact moment. Like, I'm so grateful that I was there from the very beginning. And I did hear some of the you crying and some of the emotions that you went through, but like, it's almost as if you instantly just turned that switch on and you started to really walk in your purpose. And I feel like that's so important because like we go through so much issues and problems and we don't realize that it's really for our purpose. And you were able to turn that around instantly. And like, you've been running and running ever since. And like, to me, that's so admirable, like on your part. Like, you didn't let it devastate you. And I get that whole, like, you have 2 choices. And it's true. You could either lose your mind or you can let it work for your purpose. So like, that's good to hear and to know that my thoughts about your experience was aligned with what you were actually going through.
Right.
So
yeah.
I think my next question is, so I knew Kia, and my question would be, what are some of the signs that someone may be in a domestic violence situation? I don't know if you want to relate it to that or just relate it to something that you've experienced while you've done like peer educating that they may not know or that they may overlook. You know, like, what are those signs?
Right. So from my personal experience, I experienced a lot of male privilege, someone using their privilege over me in the sense that I can do more than you because I'm a man. And that was displayed in a number of different ways. Another example was I did experience sexual abuse, non-consensual intercourse numerous times. In my sister's sense, it was more financial dependency. She was 100% financially dependent on him. So if she moved, she had to ask him. If she wanted anything done, she had to ask him for the money. Wow. So he used that as a sense of power and control over her. And I remember in my abuse, in one of my relationships, I felt like I had to ask him to speak in a sense because I was so afraid that he would yell at me, scream at me, and this person didn't hit me on a regular basis. So that's why it was hard for me to tell that this was abusive because in the media, we see abusive relationships as this person hit me, this person gave me a black and blue. I've never gotten a black and blue, and I'm not sure if my sister ever did. So that's why it was hard for me to see, wait, this person is trying to control what I wear, where I go, what I do, who I hang out with.
Right.
And all of that is a type of control. Somebody who says that they love you in a week. Like, all of these things could be like, it's the intention behind those actions, right?
That makes it abusive.
Right. So those actions were intended to control me, and to some extent it did.
Right.
And the same thing to my sister as well. And I think a lot of people don't realize that isolation is a form of abuse. When you are trying to isolate someone from their entire family, their support system, and moving them away to a state where they know nobody, where they only have you, that means that they are 100% dependent on you at all times.
Right.
And when I was younger and my sister was married, I didn't really realize that she had no support in South Carolina where she was. And even in my abusive relationships, though I have a whole bunch of family in New York, I felt isolated because I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone. And I felt disappointed in myself. So to some extent, I was isolated from the people that I care about.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's like people think that physical abuse is the roughest form of abuse, but emotional abuse almost equates to it, but you don't really see the signs of it. So control is one, isolation are one of the signs, or maybe one of the pre-steps that I don't know if that's the right form to use, that they do to try to emotionally abuse you. So I think that's good that we're now aware of it, or at least know it, so that we know when we're in those in those situations, we know what it is, you know?
In terms of like teens, I've noticed that one prominent form of abuse is extreme jealousy. So jealousy regarding social media passwords, friends that are of the opposite sex, spending more time doing your extracurricular activities than with that partner, and they mask it in the sense of, I care about you so much, why aren't you around me? But when I'm around you, my grades are low. I dropped out of all of the clubs that I was in, so you are isolating me.
Right.
And a lot of people don't see that as a type of abuse. But when you think about it, if I'm isolated, who do I have to go to?
True.
No one.
True.
Right.
And it goes kind of into my next question, is what have you learned from speaking to these women about domestic violence? Like, what have you really learned, or what is like the hardest thing for them to do? Or maybe that's not the right way to say it. How hard is it for them to get out of those situations, if that makes sense?
I would say one of the hardest things for anyone experiencing abuse, whether you're a man or a woman, is realizing that you're even being abused. Because what if you're not being hit? Everybody's not taught that isolation is a type of abuse. Everybody's not taught that peer pressure and economic abuse are all abuse that you don't see with your eyes. So it's hard for somebody to say, wait, I'm experiencing A, B, C. And so that's one thing that I noticed that is very difficult for people to realize. That was hard for me, and I didn't realize it until I went to go speak to a social worker, and she said, so what's going on with you? And I felt like I didn't need to be there, to be honest. But then as soon as I said my story out loud, I just started bawling because I was like, this is wrong. And I didn't realize it until I said it, until I like reflected it.
That what you were experiencing was actually abuse.
Was abuse.
You realized that when you went to the social worker.
But we don't always have social workers that are just there waiting to. And a lot of people have to be open to a social worker. I went to her because she kept calling me, to be honest. I didn't want to go. But I'm glad that I went, of course. But those lights don't always go off for people. And some people don't want to see it. So that's one barrier that I noticed. And of course, another barrier is leaving. That's the most dangerous time for anyone to be in that's the most dangerous time for anyone that's in an abusive relationship, when they're ready to leave. And on average, it takes 7 times. 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship. So it's not just, oh, this is abuse, green light, let's go. It's, I can't leave because I don't have any money. I can't leave because my family might not even know that I'm dating, and this person might out me. I can't leave because we have children together. There's so many barriers that prevent people from leaving. And I think it's hard to, especially with today's day and time, social media, the backlash that you'll get. Especially if this person appears to be this charming, amazing individual, especially in front of your family, and you say, wait, I'm being abused. The family could easily say, what did you do? Because this person is an angel, so you must have done something. So it makes you feel like, I have no one to talk to, I have nowhere to go, and you're stuck.
Might as well just stay in this situation.
Right.
Weighing out your options. It's probably better for you feel, to be with that person.
Exactly.
Then. So You did speak a little bit about your domestic violence situation. Maybe my question to you would be, how did it feel when you found out that you were in that? Like, were you shocked? Were you upset? Were you angry? What was that immediate thought that you had? I think for me, I can't say that I was in a domestic violence situation. Maybe it was more so emotionally abused. So when I came to the realization, I was almost like, how could I allow myself, like me, this strong Black woman, to succumb to something like that? So what was your feeling when you found out? And how did you work through that?
Right. So when I realized that I was in an abusive relationship, one of the first things I was thinking was like, who? Like,
Right.
Not me. This doesn't, I think I know that I had a stereotypical idea of what a victim looks like.
Right.
Somebody who's really shy, somebody who is just meek and to themselves, and I'm very loud and outgoing, and I'm like, this doesn't happen to me, you know. And even when I started to tell people, one response that I got was, you're too smart for that. Wow. Like, there's no GPA for abuse, right? It could happen to anyone, whether you went to school, whether you didn't, whether you have $1 million or you're unemployed. Like, abuse doesn't discriminate. So I felt mad at myself, but more so in shock. That was more. It was more just so like, a shock, I'm really being with somebody who does not respect me, who makes me afraid to even speak. I have to practically ask for permission. I would say, please promise that you won't yell at me from what I'm about to say. Wow, I feel like I was in jail. Right. So when I realized that I was in the abusive relationship, I still stayed, but I remember that I continued to see my social worker.
Got it. So you were seeing your social worker when you were with that individual.
I didn't just realize it and then say, okay, I can't do this. I kept going back to him.
Right. And
I felt like I was living two lives. It's like I'm sitting here trying to get help, but when I leave you, I'm going right to his house. So let's say I'm in church with my abuser, and my pastor's talking about domestic abuse. Right. One of us is going to leave the church.
That's true. That's true.
So that could, like, prevent someone from not going to church or not bringing it up at all, because it's like, I don't want to feel targeted in the church, or I don't want to feel like I should say something and I'm afraid, and then this person's sitting right next to me. And then there was one time I went to, like, an outreach event, and someone was speaking about an experience that he had in the church where he was aware that two abusive people were there. Right. And the pastor made direct eye contact with them, and the abuser was, like, pinching the victim like next to each other. So the victim didn't say anything. Wow. So it's like, if I'm going to church to get help, and you're sitting next to me and you're the person I'm trying to get help from, are you going to speak up? Probably not.
That's true.
If you are afraid of the person.
That's true.
That creates a huge barrier. And I noticed another type of abuse is spiritual abuse.
Yeah, that's a whole different topic, but that's definitely very prevalent.
Of course, I'm a Christian. However, I do not know a lot of verses word for word. However, I do know that abuse is nowhere condoned in the Bible. Right. In a relationship. Right. So regardless of how much of the Bible you know more than me, you can never convince me that that's allowed in a relationship.
And sometimes that's used against.
Absolutely. I feel like there are certain things that are twisted. Right. To where it's like, but in the Bible it says you are supposed to submit. Right. However, it also says
the man is supposed to love his wife as much as he loves his church. Right. But we forget that part. We just somehow leave that out.
He's going to talk about the beginning and not the end. Right. And I'm pretty sure that if Jesus loved the church that much, he wouldn't want no abuse.
Right. True. He wouldn't want men abusing their wives. So I think that's 100% true, and something that I often think about is used against women. Yeah. So if you could talk to your younger self, maybe your younger self when you were in some of your domestic violence situations, what would you say?